There are many different aspects that go into a nation's development and many different reasons that people move to and from places. For one, education has started to bring thousands of students from their home countries to nations all across the world. The influx of different students coming to the United States has brought more money to the U.S. economy. This, in turn, brings an even greater amount of international students year after year. This increase in urbanization around college towns and major cities have caused some negative side effects as well. With the increase in population in major cities, poverty is on the rise.
Urbanization has also increased environmental downfall, with nature being taken up by skyscrapers, streets, and parking lots. Why is all of this happening, you ask? Well, education in the US has been sought after by a lot of people all around the world, but more specifically in China. The NAFSA recorded that in the 2017-2018 school year, over 1 million international students studied at US universities. In 2018, 15% of all undergraduate students were Chinese students here at Miami University. Why do so many Chinese students choose schools in the US? Most international students say it's because US universities have more majors to choose from. Others say it's because they want to escape the ultra-competitive society and standards in China. Here are some students talk about their reasons for coming to a US college.
Actually, I was admitted by a Chinese university in Shanghai, but I just refused that offer and applied for the university here because I was assigned a major which I'm not very interested in, and I think I want to go somewhere I can learn whatever I want.
For my family, they actually had to use a big part of their savings to send me to school here.
I didn't apply the Chinese college. I was pretty settled to come to the States because I studied in an international high school in China.
After I came to US, I was actually really shocked about the learning style here. I think the professors are really open to questions, whereas in China we don't really raise questions to our instructor.
Because of the increase in international students coming to the U.S., it raises the question, how does this impact the economy? From the over 1 million international students, they contributed $39 billion and supported more than 455,000 jobs in the U.S. Because so many people are coming for the purpose of education, it is leading to a workforce with far more personal capital, which in turn causes economic growth. In contrast to this, the Yale Tribune has brought up questions on this specifically and whether or not urbanization actually increases poverty or decreases it. What was found was that because of the rapid increase in the economy, the distribution of wealth continually becomes more and more disproportionate among the U.S. Intensive urban growth can lead to greater poverty, with local governments unable to provide services for all people. This distribution of wealth is so disproportionate because of wealthy nations taking advantage of cheap labor and resources from the lower income nations.
Emanuel Wallerstein discusses this idea of exploitation in his book, The Modern World System, Capitalist Agriculture and the Origins of the European World Economy in the 16th Century. He states, among the most important structures of the current world system is a power hierarchy between core and periphery, in which powerful and wealthy core societies dominate and exploit weak and poor peripheral societies. Technology is a central factor in the positioning of a region in the core or the periphery. He goes on further stating, peripheral countries are structurally constrained to experience a kind of development that reproduces their subordinate status.
The poverty levels are typically divided into three categories in the United States: the lower working class, middle class, and the upper class. As we have seen by the distribution of wealth in our country, The lines between the lower and middle classes are blurring with the amount of money households take in. Now the top 1% holds 40% of the nation's wealth, while the poorest side of the scale doesn't even register on the chart.
Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them.
The majority of the United States continues to fall behind in being able to afford necessities, while the top 1% is able to afford anything they want. Poverty around major cities is constantly increasing, while the top 1% of the population does nothing to help. Almost half of the country cannot even compare to the wealth of the upper class.
There are many harmful causes that urbanization has had on our environment. The growth of major cities and population has increased the need for housing, transportation, and disposal of waste. The increase in housing has attributed to deforestation and excess energy use. With major cities expanding outwards and upwards, the need for more habitable buildings is a worry for major cities with an increasing poverty rate. Transportation has also attributed to much of the negative environmental costs that urbanization leads to. Multiple cars and roads needed for said cars increase CO2 emissions and increase the waste of materials for old broken cars. Public transportation is still used, but still emits CO2 and is costly for residents of these cities. Waste disposal from major cities continues to be a major problem for the United States. With trash overflowing every day and more landfills being put to use, high consumption within these cities leads to greater need for waste disposal and its negative environmental effects.
Cities have a big impact on their local climate through the materials that are used in cities, the use of different materials, whether it's concrete, the loss of vegetative qualities, the loss of vegetative cover completely transforms the local hydrology and the local climate system. Cities are shaping their environment and shaping their climate. And I think one of the big unknowns as we enter the 21st century is, on the whole, how will cities not only change their local climate, both in terms of precipitation and temperature, but how will many cities actually affect more regional and even global climate?
Worldwide, cities are expected to absorb 2 billion more people by 2030.
So what have we learned so far? We've learned that education, economics, poverty, and the environment are all affected by the global population and urbanization in different ways. Within each of these facets of society, when one area is influenced, another is too. The domino effect is continuing at an alarming rate, and we must step up and realize what's going on. From understanding this subject, we will be able to see how we should prepare in terms of the worldwide effects that come from urbanization in relation to migration. Thanks for watching, Rockstars.